From the 35-year-old getting a surprise call for a shot at the bantamweight title, to having Rashad Evans back her against the dominant Amanda Nunes, Irene Aldana has finally gotten her chance at gold. And here's everything you need to know about the exciting matchup. For starters, she wasn't really supposed to be there. Despite taking the fight world by storm, Irene Aldana wasn't exactly supposed to be competing 89. And that too against Amanda Nunes for the UFC bantamweight title. The main event was actually scheduled to be a high-voltage trilogy fight between Juliana Pena and Nunes. But about a few weeks back, UFC president Uncle Dana hopped on Instagram and announced how Pena had to be pulled out after breaking her ribs. And while the announcement shocked everyone, Irene Aldana was quick to rebuild the hype, as she stepped up to take on one of the greatest female fighters of all time. Aldana has successfully won more than 80% of her fights in the cage. And if I'm talking about her performance inside the octagon, she has 12 fights to her name, with 8 of them being Ws. And if that wasn't enough, Irene also has a lot of experience competing against the top-ranked fighters in the division, as she's a former Invicta FC title challenger. Even though Amanda happens to be the most intimidating fighter in the division, Aldana is holding her ground, as she looks to become the 4th active Mexican-born UFC champion. I mean, did you see the face-off between these dangerous women? It was intense. Of course, Amanda seemed unfazed by it all, but I was surprised to see how Irene stood tall with her eyes locked on the target. Either way, Aldana's done an excellent job at putting this fight back on the charts, as fans wait eagerly for the 10th of June. But who has the momentum going into this matchup? Well, I've already told you about Irene's past few performances inside the octagon. She's on an incredible 6-fight win streak and packs enough power to fold anyone in the division. But is it enough against Nunes, the #1 pound-for-pound female fighter? Only time will tell, but from the looks of it, it's going to be a really interesting matchup, because Amanda returns to the octagon after an 11-month gap. But this is Amanda Nunes I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. She's been ruling 2 divisions with an iron fist for the longest time now. I mean, she's only lost 1 fight in the last 8 years. It was against the one and only Juliana Pena. But Nunes didn't let that slide for too long. She quickly avenged the loss last year, reclaiming her spot as the queen of the bantamweight division. So yeah, even though Irene is coming in hot with her rhythm on point, Nunes has a terrifying habit of killing the hype and shutting down her opponents. Oh, and for everyone thinking Irene has a disadvantage going into this matchup because of the surprise call-up, trust me, she isn't complaining. The 35-year-old is stoked to be finally getting her shot at gold. And with June 10th right around the corner, the fans can't wait to see how she fares against Nunes. But what did the odds say? Is there any chance of an upset? Well, Irene is the clear underdog at UFC 289. It's no surprise, to be honest. I mean, Amanda would be the favorite against everyone in the division, right? But a -450 underdog? Now that's a bit alarming. I don't know about you, but this fight could end up turning ugly in no time. If we look at both fighters side by side, Amanda likes to mix things up. She likes to stand up and deliver. But at the same time, the #1 pound-for-pound fighter doesn't mind taking the battle to the mats. Irene, on the other hand, doesn't really enjoy fighting on the ground. Since she's so tall, she enjoys delivering strong punches, enough to put away anyone in the division. But I'm not sure if that's going to be an effective strategy against the champion. Or look at it this way. The only reason why Aldana has been so successful in her stand-up and deliver fighting style is because of her height. She towers over most fighters in the division, with an impressive reach of 68 inches. But despite being taller than Nunes, she has a shorter reach. So I'm not too sure whether she'll be able to use that to her advantage at UFC 289. Although, Irene's a monster when it comes to counters. And if Amanda gets a bit too carried away, the 35-year-old has enough up her sleeve to end the fight right there and then. So yeah, what's my take on the odds? Well, I think they're accurate when it comes to Irene being the underdog. But by -450? Now that's something I don't necessarily agree with, because even Amanda admitted that Aldana is powerful. At the UFC 289 press conference, Nunes talked about her opponent's fighting style in detail. And to be honest, I was blown away by how well she studied the competition. I mean, she knew everything about Irene's fighting style. What to do, what not to do, how to do it, everything. The Lioness knows Aldana is one of the most powerful strikers in the division. And remember how I was just talking about her counters? Nunes even touched up on that and mentioned how she'll have to be extra careful picking her shots, because just one wrong move and the Mexican will whip up a nasty strike, sending Nunes to the shadow realm. Plus, it takes a lot of guts to praise your opponent before a fight. But at the same time, it shows confidence as well, since she's openly talking about what she needs to avoid doing. And in case you're wondering what Irene said, don't get your hopes up too high, because she's choosing to keep her cards close to her chest. She didn't have a lot to say. And if you ask me, it makes sense, because I don't think anyone would want to talk strategy in front of Amanda. But intimidated or not, Irene deserves this. And since it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I'm sure she's putting in the work and will be prepared for UFC 289. Here's the interesting bit though. This is the first time UFC fighters have actually gone against Nunes. Don't believe me? Check out what Diego Lopez had to say. Diego Lopez has put forward a controversial claim that Irene will destroy Amanda at UFC 289. And I know what you're thinking right now. This isn't really something you hear that often. It's actually the other way around, since it's usually Nunes who does the destroying. But since Diego has been working so closely with Aldana recently, he thinks the fighting world is in for a real shocker on June 10th. According to the recent UFC signee and jiu-jitsu expert, Irene has added a lot of depth to her ground game. And while her strong point has always been boxing, Amanda won't know what to expect when they finally lock horns inside the octagon. It's an interesting prediction to say the least, but again, they're just words for now, since the 35-year-old hasn't made any public comments about the fight yet. But it isn't like Lopez doesn't know who Irene is up against. It's Amanda Nunes, one of the greatest female fighters of all time. So, even if the Mexican does end up becoming the new bantamweight champion, it's gonna be an absolute shocker since Nunes is the better fighter by miles. But that's how the UFC works. The throne eventually goes to someone else. And after being on the top for so long, Nunes' time might just be at its end, as Aldana looks to sweep the Lioness off her feet. Finally, let's talk about what Rashad Evans had to say about the matchup. Evans took on the heat as he sided with Irene to come out victorious at UFC 289. He shared his prediction on ESPN MMA recently, and the other commentators were stunned after hearing him pick the underdog. And it's not because Mexico's on the rise or something, it's because he thinks Aldana has become such a massive force in the division now. Plus, Evans also talked about how difficult it is to ignore that left hook of hers. Whenever it lands, it sounds nasty, and 9 times out of 10, it's always led to a knockout. Also, I really gotta give credit to Rashad for talking about all the right things here. See, Amanda might be quick, sharp, big, and accurate inside the cage, but so is Irene. She's all of those things. And since she's shown that she has enough gas in the tank to go the distance, it seems like Amanda is in for a real surprise on June 10th. But then again, isn't that what everyone said about Juliana after she defeated Nunes the first time they fought? Fans and pros thought Nunes' time as a champion is finally over. And what do you know? She comes back and absolutely schools Peña in a rematch. So yeah, from pros like Rashad Evans siding with Irene Aldana to the 35-year-old getting a surprise call-up for a shot at the bantamweight title, that's everything about the main event at UFC 289.